Books, and thank you for coming. It's great to see so many people here tonight for Fiona's launch. Thanks and congratulations to Sarah McGregor of Clockwork Books, who have published Spire, Fiona's latest novel. I think it's a great cover, and I think the book looks really great, so congratulations, Sarah. And then, of course, congratulations to you, Fiona, on what I think is your fifth novel, in traditional book form at least, am I right? Because, Fiona does a lot of writing, so it's quite difficult to keep track. I have to confess I have just read the back cover, and actually it's enough. It sounds like a brilliant plot and absolutely terrifying. So that's meant to be a compliment, Fiona, well done. And I do know that Fiona is absolutely brilliant at getting you to turn the pages, and I can just see that she's done just that in this book. A little bit about Fiona. She's very well known in writing circles, and she's a big part of the local writing community. She's the author of the Trinity Rising series, which was 3 books. And her last book was Now Following You. She's also written a series of mobile novels, I assume that's for your cell phone, called Sisters. She blogs for Thought Leader and for Mail and Guardian Woman. She reviews books for the Sunday Times and for the Times, and she's really a great reviewer, someone you can really trust. She's been a judge on the 20 in 20 Best Short Stories of South Africa's Democracy Project, as well as the Bessie Head Literature Award for Short Stories. So she's deep in the local literary scene. Thank you, Fiona, and congratulations again. Chatting to her is Gus Silber, and it's great because he does have a way of getting right to the nub of things. He does a great interview. He's also a well-known journalist and an author, and these days, as I think I said last time, he's someone you just have to follow on Twitter. He really is a fantastic tweeter. He has over 105,000 followers, and he describes himself on his Twitter bio as someone who plays with words and sometimes works with them too, as a journalist, author, scriptwriter, speechwriter, tweetwriter. Thank you, Gus.
Thank you, Kate. Oh, thank you very much. I actually read Spire on my phone, and it was actually quite an amazing experience because it really is a very easy read. It's a very hard book not to read. The chapters are very short. And I found that whenever I had a gap, when I was kind of waiting for my tea to brew, when I was kind of walking my dog in the park, I would read, and then I'd find that I'd delay whatever I was doing so I could read more. So it's quite interesting to see the physical book, a different kind of feel to it. But it's a very gripping book, it's a very chilling book, it's very appropriate that it's being launched in the bitter cold of the Joburg winter. So those of you who haven't read it, I think a good way to kick off, Fiona's just going to read a passage to give you an idea of the location, the Antarctic base Spire on the South Pole, and just to give you a sense of the atmosphere of this book. Okay.
Thanks so much, Gus. Is this working? Can everyone hear me? Okay. The passage I'm going to read is near the beginning. Our heroine, who is a medical doctor and virologist, at a base at the South Pole, has been running into a bit of trouble because she arrived at the base under heavy security with frozen viruses in tow that she's planning to do experiments on, and they are locked up safely in the deep freeze under heavy guard, but people are getting sick and people are starting to die, and she can't seem to make sense of this. So she's been on Skype to headquarters in New York, and she's busy discussing the situation with the director of the Spire project in New York. When last did you see a weather report, Doctor? Director King asked. A while ago, Carolina admitted. It's been impossible. I haven't had a moment. The South Pole is surrounded by a severe storm system. We're calling it Hilda. It should reach you in the next day or so, but it has already made flying impossible. It's not that we don't want to get to you, it's that we can't. Dismay must have shown on Caroline's face because the older woman relented. Look, if your viruses are really intact, it's unlikely that your patient has hemorrhagic fever. It must be something else, something idiopathic. If you send through your data, we'll get our best diagnosticians to look at it. The screen went blank. Director King was not one for lingering farewells. There's a patient who wants to get in. Kelabile's voice in Caroline's ear made her jump. What? Why? She says she's sick. She says she'll take her chances with whatever diseases we've got in here, but she wants medical treatment now. Well, said Caroline, New York is pretty sure our bleeding patient is not infectious, so let her in. A woman Caroline recognized from her morning workouts in the gym came into the sick bay. She was clutching her face and sobbing. What is it? What's wrong with me? Her cheeks and hands were covered in tiny, fluid-filled blisters. Caroline didn't have to consult the history books to know she was looking at a case of smallpox.
So I think, Fiona, first question, your other books have all been set very much in South Africa, in the context in which you live, in the context with which you're familiar. For this book, you've gone completely out of your own zone. You've gone at pretty much as far south as you can go. What attracted you to the setting, and also, did the setting come first and then the story, or the other way around?
Well, I had no plans or ideas to write anything like this, but about a year ago, about this time last year, there was a story in the news about the actual base at the South Pole, the Amundsen Scott base, and a very sort of daring and thrilling rescue mission that was being conducted from there. There were 2 patients who were very gravely ill and had to be airlifted out in the middle of winter. And the policy is that when winter starts, sort of at the end of February, the last plane leaves for the winter and no planes come or go for the next 9 months. The next plane arrives sort of at the beginning of November, because to get a plane through is extremely dangerous for the pilots and for everybody concerned. So it's only done in the most exceptional of circumstances. And they were doing this extremely daring airlift out of the South Pole. And just sort of reading the details around that, the idea of 40-odd people being isolated at the South Pole for 9 months with no possibility of rescue, it was just fascinating to me. And then I started thinking, you know, what if it weren't so much 40 people as one person on her own at the end of the world with no possibility of rescue? Let's say a really severe storm blew in, you know, then what? It was just a fantastic story seed. I had to write about it.
Okay. One thing that I loved about your book was the high body count. I think within the first couple of chapters, there's 50 people or so at the base, and within the first couple of chapters, it's just Dr. Caroline Birchall. I thought that was very bold, but like Game of Thrones on ice, you know, just get rid of everybody as quickly as you possibly can. Fiona, do you have any qualms about getting rid of so many people so soon, or was it your strategy to just get them out the way and focus on your heroine?
Well, I initially had plans to sort of get them all gone by the end of the first chapter, but then I realized that that wasn't actually viable and that it was a better build-up of suspense to sort of eliminate them a bit more slowly than that. But yeah, there was one person in particular. Our heroine becomes friendly with her nurse, who's also a South African, a man from South Africa, and they become quite close. And killing him off was, one of the hardest things I've had to do on page. Although I knew he was going to die from the beginning.
Just in terms of the decisions that you make as an author, we chatted the other day, and you told me that there was a particularly grueling scene, which I won't expect you to reveal here because it'll give away a major plot point. You told me that your reason for actually getting rid of this scene was that you didn't want to disturb your male readers too much. So on behalf of your male readers, thank you very much for that. But, you seem to suggest that men read this kind of story, thriller, horror. I see it as a horror book, some people see it as a thriller. What's your sense of the way men read and the way women read? Is there for you a strong difference, and are you conscious of this when you're writing?
Well, I don't want to be too essentialist about this. I don't want to sort of divide people too much into men are this and women feel like this and respond in certain ways. But having said that, I think there are sort of genderized differences in the way people experience horror. And for women and people who identify as women, there's a particular kind of gynecological horror that sort of cuts to the very core of your being. And this is something that I was flirting with in the book and had a full-blown affair with in the first draft of the book, and then decided just to cut out because it was just too much. I didn't want my male readers to have a kind of ew, gross kind of reaction. That isn't exactly what one's going for. You don't want horror to tip over into almost farce. But yeah, I think that what horrifies men and what horrifies women can at times be subtly different in different ways.
I think the power of your story is absolutely universal, and for me the horror in it is this idea of being completely isolated and completely alone in what is actually an amazingly high-tech base. And there's actually a YouTube walkthrough that you link to from your website where you can see just how amazing this base is. I mean, you can actually easily see spending 9 months there as being a great kind of getaway from the world outside. But the horror is being left entirely on your own. So quite early in your book, much to my relief, you actually introduce a companion for Dr. Birchall, and that is a cat by the name of Shaka, who kind of plays a very key role in the book for a whole variety of reasons, and I think in terms of narrative is very important. And I believe this cat is actually modeled on your own cat, so tell us a little bit about Shaka as an inspiration.
The real life Chuck is very, very sweet. He's an extremely obese black cat who looks more like a hippo than a cat, and is extremely social and friendly, just as I make him in the book. Very loving, just wants to be with people all the time. He's just a sort of big, fat, placid sweetheart. So he's the second of my cats to make their way into a book. So I've got 2 others, so there'll have to be at least 2 other books.
Is your cat then your writing companion in the sense of walking across the keyboard while you're trying to write? Is that sort of thing?
They are all that sort of cat, yes. I write with cats draped over different parts of the body, half on and half off the keyboard and so on. Yeah. I've documented it for Instagram.
Okay, so one of the kind of impending horrors of the book is, will the cat survive? So you have to read to find out. But you also you talk about a syndrome, polar madness, which I found very fascinating. The idea of not just kind of, in this particular case, being completely on your own, but also kind of being subject to what must be a fairly common syndrome for people who are stuck on the space. Just tell us a little bit about that. And also, was it a concern on your part that after a while you might start feeling that yourself, given that you were so enmeshed in the actual location?
Yes, this polar madness thing is interesting. It's something that happens at both ends of the world. You'll get it at the North Pole and the South Pole. Wherever climates are extreme and you have long periods of light where the sun doesn't set, or long periods like 8 months of darkness where the sun never rises. And that extreme weather, the claustrophobia of being shut in, the idea that these people that you are with, you can't get away from them for 9 months. They are your companions for 9 months, whether you like it or not. There still is an unsolved murder from the 1970s that happened at the Amundsen Scott base. They know the person was murdered, but to this day they don't know by whom. But it's believed that whoever did the murdering succumbed to polar madness syndrome. And yes, when I was writing, I did get very sort of enmeshed in the character and in the situation, and sort of felt the extreme isolation penetrating me. I think, yeah, if you're enjoying what you're writing, you do get sucked into it quite deeply.
I mean, writing itself isn't it a very lonely and kind of isolating profession? How do you actually cope with that loneliness, if you do feel it?
I think I kind of revel in it. It's really is the right job for me. I mean, I have a family with 3 children and sort of quite a busy, engaged life in other ways. So I can take hours off to write and not feel myself getting too lonely or alone.
Okay. One thing you did that I found very interesting, and kind of in the tradition of Charles Dickens, you actually serialized your novel on Facebook. In other words, you kind of gave it away. And you kind of used the cliffhanger technique. In other words, come back tomorrow for another chapter. But we live in an age of instant gratification, where even like, you know, the idea of binging on a series, watching all 13 episodes in one night, is something you can do now. You no longer have to wait. What was your kind of thought about effectively using the cliffhanger technique in the age of social media?
Yeah, I think that if there weren't this sort of pressure, this realization that people want their content now and they want all of it right now and they want to stay up through the night to suck it all in. If I didn't feel that pressure, I wouldn't have felt so obliged to end each chapter on a real cliffhanger, because I think that's the only way you can really keep people reading. And the whole experience divided my contacts into sort of two groups of people: those who enjoyed the serialized version and were happy to wait, you know, looked forward to it each day, the next episode, and those who absolutely refused to even start because they just said, you know, I'll wait till it's in book form and then I'll read the whole thing all in one go. And I am that person. I'm the person who wants everything in front of me to consume right now. I don't want to wait according to someone else's timetable. But a lot of readers were very happy to wait. It was interesting. It was almost like the delayed gratification did something for them.
Yeah. I definitely fall into that category. I'd rather get everything in one go. So I didn't actually read a book on Facebook, but I thought what you were doing was very interesting. Were you actually guided to any big extent by comments and feedback? Did you go back and re-look and change coming chapters depending on how people received the chapters by day by day?
I sort of looked at and took on board all the comments, definitely. There was only one comment that made me change direction slightly, and that was from my mother. Our heroine had just come through a sort of massive crisis, and I let her have one chapter in which she had a bit of a breather, you know, things were sort of okay for a moment. And my mother said to me, "What is this, chicklet?" And I realized, okay, no more breathers, no more chilling for this heroine, you know, action must come, thick and fast. And I actually ended up cutting 20,000 words off the original manuscript, just to tighten it up and make it faster.
Okay. Yeah, there's quite a well-known principle in the world of script writing and theatre and so on, and it's, if you divide a story into 3 acts, in your first act you get your character up a tree, in the second act you throw rocks at your character, and in the third act you give your character a way to get down from the tree. And I did feel a lot in your book. I actually thought, you know, Fiona, you really are being very hard on Dr. Birchall. Yeah. And I actually kind of had the sense that, you know, you have real power over your character, and you've kind of answered it by saying that at some point you actually intensified the action and you made things harder. Did you kind of plot your story as you went along, or did you always know that there would be a way for her to actually survive and get out of this? Or did she kind of take you by surprise in a sense as a character, her resourcefulness, her courage and so on? Just how much planning goes into it and just how much kind of happens at the character's kind of dictate?
Yeah, I started off with a sort of broad arc where I knew how it was going to begin, I knew how it was going to end, I knew the sort of various antagonists along the way, but the details of it, you know, I not only posted it 1 chapter a day, I wrote it 1 chapter a day. And so each new day I had to think, okay, this is a chapter complete in itself, it's got to end on a cliffhanger, how exactly are we going to do this? So there were days where I kind of dreamt up a new challenge for her. And having come up with a challenge, I then had to come up with a way of getting through it. So yeah, I did discover kind of depths of resourcefulness in the character as I was going along. Yeah.
I'd love to know your secret, given that you have a household full of children and cats. How do you actually manage to write that much per day? What's your secret?
Well, I was dictating it. I was speaking it into a dictaphone, which is it's something I've done for 3 of my 5 books. Just because my life being the way it is, and especially the way it was when the children were toddlers, yeah. I just didn't have that time to sit down at a keyboard. But I had plenty of aimless time when I was sort of wandering around behind a toddler who's kind of poking things with sticks, you know, totally unhurriedly. Yeah. And that was dead time. So if I had a dictaphone in my hand and could be speaking my story into the dictaphone, then suddenly, you know, that wasn't wasted time anymore. It was writing time.
Okay, that actually explains a lot, because the tone of your book and the style of your writing is actually very conversational. It doesn't kind of feel like forced writing. It actually feels as if you're kind of having a conversation with the reader. So that's a great secret. The dark web is quite a strong kind of plot device in your book. And for those of you who don't know, the dark web is the kind of part of the internet that's under the water. So the part that we use, the part that we can search on Google, is the tip of the iceberg. And then below that, in the darkness, is the part of the web where, for instance, drugs are openly traded and sold, and all kinds of human trafficking, perhaps, on the dark web. And in Spire, the dark web kind of features quite strongly. So, Fiona, my question to you, as a very dedicated researcher, you put a huge amount of research into this book. Did you spend a lot of time trawling the dark web, and what was the kind of darkest thing that you found?
I spent a lot of time on the normal web, on the internet, reading about other people's research into the dark web. I didn't actually venture there myself.
Okay.
And I approached it with a certain amount of trepidation, wondering what I was going to find.
Yeah.
And what I found was that most of it is urban legend. You know, there's the sort of supposed red rooms and torture rooms and so on that you can link to live and watch happening live. They seem to be basically urban legends. They're not real. People have gone into it very, very carefully to find out if it is real, and it isn't. But, you know, on the other hand, you can trade weapons, you can access child pornography, human trafficking, I've heard rumors about, unconfirmed. But, I mean, weapons trading and child pornography, that's bad enough. That's about as bad as it gets. So, yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and for my purposes, it didn't have to be the sort of torture chambers. It just had to be people discussing things under the radar, and it does seem as though that is what happens.
Okay, there's a huge amount of technical detail in the book and clinical detail. You don't simply talk about a virus, you don't simply talk about a surgical procedure, you actually go into a huge amount of detail about it. Were you at all concerned that, where did you draw the line with that huge amount of detail, and where did you kind of say, I mustn't overwhelm the reader? Because there's always a danger that you can kind of get caught up in the detail at the expense of the story. What's your approach for that sort of level of detail in your stories?
Well, this book was different to my previous books. Previously, I've done a lot of research and then sort of slammed that research all into the book, and then taken it all out again because it was just boring and slowed the story down and bogged down the narrative. And with this book, I also did a huge amount of research and then just sort of dribbled bits of it into the narrative. And when I was reading over it, I realized that this was totally unsatisfactory, that this kind of almost procedural book demands quite a bit of information, quite a bit of detail. So back went in quite a bit of the research. Hopefully not at the point of overwhelming the reader, but just it needed to be there, that kind of gritty, granular, I did this and then I did that and then I did that kind of detail. It was a kind of story that begged for that sort of detail.
Yeah. There's multiple layers to your book, and one thing I really found quite interesting was kind of the two invisible presences in the book. The one is the viral contagion, and the other is the internet, which actually is a character in the book. A lot of the conversation takes place on Skype, for instance, and the internet is a lifeline to the outside world. And Fiona, you've written quite a lot, particularly your previous book, Now Following You, which is about the kind of darker side of social media. And you spend a lot of time on the internet. You're a very active blogger, you're active on social media, Facebook and Twitter and so on. What darkness is a threat for us? Where do you fit in terms of how you see this big force?
With my previous book, Now Following You, a lot of people have misinterpreted it as a cautionary tale. It actually isn't. It's a story about embracing technology and embracing social media and people finding a new way to live their lives. And the only cautionary angle is that I wanted people to stop trying to police how women conduct themselves on social media, which is something that happens a lot. This whole idea of, don't film yourself naked, don't do this, don't do that. Don't tell everyone where you're going, don't be so open, don't put your life out there. And that comes down on women a heck of a lot. You know, police yourself, protect yourself, don't wear such a short skirt, you only have yourself to blame if something happens, that kind of idea. So my take on the internet is to embrace it. I think it's wonderful. I think it's the greatest invention ever. And I just think that, you know, we as a society are learning to negotiate it in different ways. And one of the things that must stop is people telling women how to live their lives online.
Okay, I'm very pleased to hear that as a fellow internet utopian. There's a very interesting connection between your lead character in Now Following You and your lead character in Spire. Tell us about that.
Well, they're sisters, and I did, when I wrote Now Following You, I gave her two sisters, and I had an idea from the beginning to write a trilogy about the three sisters. The one is a writer, the one is a medical doctor, and the one is a ballet dancer. So, you know, the stories are completely standalone and don't need to be written, don't need to be read in sequence, or you don't need to read the others at all. They are completely independent of each other. But there is this kind of slight link between them. They are the Birchall sisters, so it's the Birchall sisters trilogy.
Okay. As soon as I heard about your book, and as soon as I saw your cover that you posted on Facebook, the first thing that popped into my mind was The Thing. I'm a big fan of horror movies, and one of the most powerful and intense horror movies that's been remade 3 times is The Thing. And I was very pleased to see that your opening sentence refers to the Thing trilogy of movies. But it also reminded me a lot of what I think is, you know, without too much argument, is the greatest horror novel ever written. And it was written by a teenager who had a dream, a feverish dream at one dark and stormy night on the shores of Lake Geneva. And of course that's Mary Shelley, who was only 18 when she started writing Frankenstein. And Frankenstein, interestingly enough, has got quite a major plot point concerning the North Pole and the monsters of the Id and so on. Are you a Frankenstein fan? Were you consciously influenced by Frankenstein? Because I certainly felt the presence of the theme of humanity and life and control and loneliness. Was it something that you had to back your mind ever while writing?
It was there, but not very much to the forefront. I'm not a horror aficionado like you are, and Frankenstein, or I can't even remember the full title, The Strange Tale, whatever, The Modern Prometheus. It's one of the horror novels that I have read from start to finish and studied when I was still studying English literature. So yeah, it was there, and especially the North Pole connection. There's a sort of chase scene across the icy wastes that was present in my mind. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, and I found it very interesting that you saw it there, which relates to what we were talking about, you know, how people consciously put something into their books, but a reader will get something else entirely out of it.
That's right. How does that make you feel as an author, the kind of sense that you actually don't own the book? That each person who reads it is going to come at it with a totally different understanding, and they'll bring their own gender, their own prejudices, their own culture to it. Does it kind of concern you that once you publish your book, it's gone and you no longer own it, and people will decide what it's about?
It doesn't really trouble me, no. I think because my training is in literary analysis, so I kind of hope that I'm fairly familiar with the concept. But yeah, as long as they're saying nice things, it's when they start saying nasty things that, you know, I sort of, my hackles get raised. But yeah, no, you don't own that book, and once it's out there, people can make of it and think of it whatever they want, and they do.
Just in terms of that, you know, there's a certain kind of riff in the book. It's actually quite literally a riff. There's a song that kind of every now and again is heard in this frozen wasteland. It's the first sort of suggestion that our heroine is actually not alone. And I hope I'm not spoiling too much by giving the song away, but it's a Crystal Berg song, Lady in Red. And I kind of, this became an earworm with me. I couldn't get the song out of my head, and that's actually a kind of form of horror on its own, you know. Other people might love the song, and it might be, you know, it might be a happy melody that might totally change the way they read the book. So just a couple more questions, then we can take some from the audience. Okay, I think Fiona, and I mentioned this in my review as well, I think if you read Spire, I think you kind of will be quite well equipped actually to survive 9 months in the Antarctic. It's very detailed, and there are situations that are kind of almost impossible to imagine anyone actually surviving, and a heroine kind of manages to deal with them. What for you was the biggest survival lesson you learned from researching the book and from writing it? And if you were at the base, what lesson do you think was the biggest one for you in terms of just making it out of there alive?
I think the biggest single thing that you have to keep doing is good self-care. If you let that slide, if you sort of let yourself sleep when you're tired and wake up when you feel like it and eat when you're hungry and just kind of lose that sense of the diurnal cycle. And it's very easy to do because it's pitch dark out there for 9 months and you are in electric light. And I think that's very disorienting for human beings. And what my heroine does is kind of force herself to adopt a 24-hour cycle where she sleeps when it's supposedly night and wakes up, whether she's ready to wake up or not, and eats breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just sticks to that familiar human routine. And I think if you lose that and just let yourself become totally disconnected from the diurnal cycle, then you really are going to go a bit cuckoo.
I suppose all novels are in some sense autobiographical, aren't they? So is this what you do? Is this your secret for surviving our kind of crazy society?
Yeah, I think you do have to survive South Africa just by sort of concentrating on daily life and just getting through the next 3 hours.
Okay, cool. Okay, so before we take questions, Fiona, just give us a little brief sense or brief preview of what comes next in the trilogy of sister stories.
Okay, well, the next sister is Ella Birchall, and her book is written, but I haven't edited it, so nobody's allowed to see it. And yeah, it's just about the kind of private school world of moms getting terribly obsessed about their daughters as young ballerinas, and this sort of anorexia and overtraining and injuries and all the kind of things that can lead to. And she steps into that world as a ballet teacher and almost gets completely swallowed up by it because it really is a shark tank out there.
Okay, so in a bit like that movie with Natalie Portman, The Black Swan?
A Black Swan, yeah. Not that much like it, but like him.
Okay, great. Any questions from anybody? Louise?
So, Gus has already asked a number of the questions I had planned to ask, so thanks, Gus. So, something I really liked about Caroline was that when there were problems, the generators went down and so on, she always manages to figure out a way to fix it. She goes on the internet or whatever the case may be, and even if it's physically intimidating, she knows that, well, she has to do this. Otherwise she has a problem. So I really liked her resourcefulness and determination. But what I was curious about, and what you guys sort of mentioned earlier with the point about the polar madness, is this descent into isolation and loneliness. So I feel like you kind of have to climb into the character's head to be able to write that. And how did you go about conveying that sense? Okay, well, there have been times in my life when I've known what it is to be lonely, when I really felt lonely. I'm at a time in my life which I think is sort of quite common with a lot of women in their 40s, where you actually crave a bit of alone time. Your life is so hectic and so busy, and there's so many people who want a piece of you that you crave aloneness. And it was difficult for me to step back into that feeling of what it actually is to be lonely, to long for people, to long for human companionship. But there have been those times in my life, sort of early 20s, where I felt it, and I kind of went back in time and drew on that feeling of real bone deep aloneness. Well, I've done it that way. With my first book, first unpublished book actually, I dictated it and then typed it up myself, listening to my own voice and revising as I went along. And that was sort of one way of doing it, but it felt like sort of doing the work twice. But these days, I actually just email it to a typist who types it up for me. So I have that kind of rough first draft then to look at and revise and go over and so on. Yeah.
Your character, did you have any inspiration with Dr. Nielsen, who in 1999 treated her own breast cancer at the South Pole? Did that feature at all? You know, she's died now, it's a bit sad.
Yeah, I know she's died, yes. I researched that whole case. Yeah, she discovered she had breast cancer, and because it is so dangerous to airlift people out of there, I mean, she, with sort of direct line communication to, I think, New York, she did her own biopsy, treated herself according to their directions, and she was the base doctor.
Yes.
So yes, her story inspired me a lot. I believe a movie was actually made of it, but I didn't want to watch that. I wanted just to sort of read her story in her own words, and I did later hear that she died, but something like 20 years later she died of breast cancer eventually. Yeah, it was sad.
10 years. 2009.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, Fiona.
Hi.
I haven't read Spire yet, so I don't really know other than what's been spoken of this evening in terms of the story. And this is an observation, not a criticism, but there are tones of Resident Evil from what you've said so far. Do you find yourself having to forcibly push away other topics, other books, other movies in order to write your own story, or do you draw on them to assist you?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Like I mentioned earlier, I am not a horror aficionado. So Resident Evil, I know the name, I know absolutely nothing about it. I'm not sure if it's a TV series or a movie or a book.
It's a game.
Series.
It's a game.
So, you know, as a kind of first-time writer who was sort of tripping into the genre of horror, I was aware that there's stuff that's come before me that I'm not aware of, that probably does what I'm doing and perhaps does it better, and that I, you know, wasn't familiar enough with the genre. So the horror genre I didn't forcibly have to push away because I know nothing about it. But when I'm writing, I don't read books because I'm too much of a chameleon. I find myself writing in the voice of the writer that I'm currently reading. So I will either reread stuff that I know very well, or just read absolutely nothing when I'm writing a first draft because it's too influential. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and ask the second question. I have read now Following You, which is, of course, as you mentioned, the trilogy, and I'm very excited to hear that there's another book coming. And I myself am a very big fan of thrillers. I love reading them. Why do you enjoy writing thrillers?
Yeah, I never knew that I did. But, you know, since I started writing, I've noticed a tendency for books that started out as something completely different to turn into mysteries or thrillers, or just for that element to kind of creep in willy-nilly. And with Spire, I decided just to embrace it, you know, to stop sort of trying to be something else, more of a women's fiction writer, and to allow myself to be a thriller, crime, mystery writer, because it just won't stay out of my writing. It just keeps coming in. I don't know why. It's not as though I consume all that much of that kind of popular culture, but yeah, I'm just attracted to it. I like it.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to make a comment, if I may. What I liked about Caroline more than anything, and the whole book, was that Caroline wasn't Laura Croft with the Tomb Raiders. You know, she was a real person with no special gifts except in her field of medicine and so on, and virology. She was just an ordinary person put in a very, very difficult circumstances. And I found that incredible, that it shows you that a real person and a woman can actually overcome all this. And I thought that was great. From a physical point of view.
The physics, it's getting worse, it's getting worse. It's your shuttle.
But I didn't mean it that way.
He's my dad, I know.
I should have prefaced it.
Fiona, I think your book is one of a crop of South African books, recent South African books that are great entertainment, just wonderful stories, whether they're horrors or thrillers or romances. Can you speak a little bit to the direction South African literature is taking it? Yeah, in that direction. Readability.
Yeah, that's interesting. A few years ago, you know, when there was kind of a third wave of popular South African fiction and genres were starting to appear for the first time ever, it did seem as though, you know, we were going to move totally in the entertainment direction, diversifying into different genres. We had chick lit and horror and thriller and crime and detective stories and everything you could think of. And then I think seriousness came washing back into our political life and into our novels as well. And, you know, literary fiction, particularly by young black writers, different voices of different diverse backgrounds, queer writers, all kinds of new voices appeared, which almost seemed to sort of herald a kind of new seriousness in the fiction. But I think there's room for both. I think there's room for the real kind of rollicking, page-turning entertainment, and there's room for the very kind of necessary literary fiction and giving voice to voices that have just been silent up till now. So yeah, I mean, there's just been an explosion of South African fiction, and it's allowing room for everything.